All right, what's going on, everybody? Keith Niebuhr with 24/7 Sports and Auburn Undercover. I am live in Auburn, Alabama. We're going to do a National Signing Day preview. Going to talk to you about what's going on with the 2018 class, who we think Auburn could finish with, what we think of the class as a whole. Again, one day out to National Signing Day. Like I said, I'll give you a quick overview, and then I'll be willing to take some of your questions. So without further ado, let's set the stage. Tomorrow, National Signing Day 2018. It's a different kind of National Signing Day, quite frankly, because of the early signing period. Auburn already has 15 young men on board, 15 signed. That leaves about 10 or 11 spots to fill. Of that, 8 are committed. So 15 early signees, 8 committed, that's 23. So roughly 2 to 3 spots to fill. Who could get these spots? Well, Auburn's working on a lot of guys on the offensive side of the ball. You still have offensive lineman Calvin Anderson out there. He's a Rice grad transfer, but he doesn't visit until this weekend. So you won't hear his name much tomorrow at all. He's visiting Auburn this weekend, and then he will decide between Auburn, Texas, and Michigan. At receiver, Auburn's still recruiting Jamar Chase of Louisiana. It's an Auburn-LSU battle. Still recruiting Justin Ross from right down the road in Phoenix City, Alabama Central High School. Auburn, Alabama, Clemson battle. Most people think Alabama, but some people think Clemson, and Auburn still may be battling. So that's one to keep an eye on. On the defensive side of the ball, a lot of guys. You've got Caleb Johnson out of Columbus Northside, a kid that Auburn has made a little bit of a move for of late. That's somebody to keep an eye on. Quay Walker, big-time linebacker who's committed to Alabama out of Crisp County, Georgia, probably leaning toward Georgia or Tennessee at this time. Defensive back to keep an eye on, potentially Cam Taylor out of Montgomery Park Crossing. He does not yet have an Auburn offer. Leaning Nebraska. Could Auburn offer an 11th hour deal? Could Auburn come in late tonight or early tomorrow morning and say, Caleb, Auburn wants you in this class, and what would he do? I think he might pick Auburn. So there's still a lot to be determined. Sorry, guys, I'm getting tweets and texts and all that stuff. So, again, a lot to be determined. Right now, Auburn has the number 10 recruiting class in the country. Set at quarterback. Set at running back. Auburn has 4 wide receivers now. If they miss on Justin Ross and Jamar Chase, you still have an outstanding receiver class. All right, can everybody hear me? Let's make sure. Somebody says no sound, so let's make sure everybody can hear me okay. A lot of times when it's no sound, it's because your sound's not turned up. So just give me one little heads up here. Is everybody able to hear me right now? Anybody? Somebody chime in. All right. So again, Auburn, 23 commitments, 2 to 3 spots left to fill. Okay. Some serious needs. You've got the offensive line. Only 2 guys on board right now. Jaleel Irvin from Atlanta, Cameron Stutz from Brooks High School in Killen, Alabama. Auburn would like to add another lineman. The main guy to watch right now, well, tomorrow, it's Richard Garage out of Tampa, Florida. He's committed to Florida, officially visited Auburn this past weekend. Will he pick Florida, stick with the Gators, or go with Auburn or Clemson? Auburn thinks it made up some serious ground with him over the weekend. The concern with Richard Garage is that he is very close to home if he picks Florida. He is the man of the house. He feels responsible for his sibling, and so Auburn is concerned that proximity to home could be the issue. However, they feel like they put up a very good fight and have given him some valid reasons to pick Auburn. So we'll see what he does tomorrow. Again, at the receiver position, Auburn looks good. It looks like Auburn will not take a tight end in the 2018 class. Flirted with a bunch of guys, including most recently Matt Alamo of New Jersey. He has committed to UCLA. But before that, Auburn had quite frankly backed off a little bit there. On the defensive side of the ball, Auburn was recruiting. Auburn was recruiting Caleb Tanner out of Atlanta, 4-star defensive end, and one-time Georgia commitment. But during the past couple of weeks, some interesting developments in his recruitment. Auburn, Florida, and Nebraska all got vibes from Caleb Tanner that he was going to their school. Auburn sort of had enough of that and pulled out of that recruitment. Looks like he's going to pick Nebraska or Florida. My pick is with Nebraska right now. Also, Malik Langham, a 4-star defensive lineman from Huntsville, Alabama, Lee High School. He visited Auburn over the weekend. Everybody on the planet thought he was headed to Alabama. Auburn impressed him, no doubt, but Florida quietly has snuck in there, and all the momentum seems to be on Florida's side right now. Now, what we're told of as of right now, it is not a done deal. Malik Langham, the 4-star defensive lineman from Huntsville, not a done deal that he's going to pick Florida. Auburn's still working him. Alabama's still working him. So there will be some mystery when he announces at 2:30 p.m. Central Time tomorrow in Huntsville. At the linebacker position, obviously, we mentioned him earlier, Quay Walker. We think Georgia or Tennessee. In the secondary, Cam Taylor is someone to keep an eye on. But really, one of the more intriguing recruitments in this cycle is a kid named Caleb Johnson. I mentioned him a little bit earlier in this segment. A mid three-star Buck linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle. Really, he's a jack of all trades from Columbus Northside. Now, this is a kid who had quietly picked up offers in the last year from the likes of Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, and Auburn. Not much was heard of him throughout the fall. He attended 2 games at Auburn in November, the big ones, obviously. The Deep South's oldest rivalry in the Iron Bowl. Had a great time. And now, of late, Auburn has made a little bit of a push here. Could he end up in the class? He very well could. He's a guy that can play a lot of different positions. He's a local kid. And if you watch his film, he just makes plays. I think what we've seen the last few years is Auburn will not get in a position where they just throw out offers at the last minute on quote-unquote reaches. They're looking for guys that are legitimate players, and I think they think that with Caleb Johnson. So still a lot to be determined. If I had to guess right now who are the most likely to join the class, my presumption would be keep an eye on Cam Taylor, the defensive back out of Montgomery, and Caleb Johnson, the defensive lineman out of Columbus. But in this Auburn Athletic Complex, which you see the stadium behind me over here, in the opposite direction of me, in front of me, I got to get all my bearings straight, the Auburn Athletic Complex. Now, that is a situation where there is an era of confidence. They think there potentially still could be a surprise out there. They're working on Richard Garage, the 4-star offensive tackle. They're working on the two receivers, 4 stars Jamar Chase and Justin Ross. They're working on Quay Walker still, but so there potentially could be a surprise out there. That's what they think. I don't know. I played a little more conservative, let's say. My gut says no, but we do know each of the last few years, Auburn has had National Signing Day surprises. You'll recall last year, Marcavius Big Cat Bryant of Crisp County, Georgia, picked Auburn, okay? Picked Auburn when it looked like he was going to LSU. In fact, he had given LSU a silent commitment. Also, Auburn late, without really any notice, without anybody knowing, picked up Jartavis Whitlow out of Lafayette, Alabama. So that was a surprise. The year before, Daniel Thomas, last-minute commitment out of Montgomery, who's now playing a lot of safety. Derek Brown, the 5-star defensive tackle. A lot of people thought he was going to Georgia. Alabama made a late push, but in the end, it was Auburn. So potentially, yes, there's always a potential for a surprise, but it's a surprise. So obviously, I can't know where a guy's going. So let's get to some questions right now. Auburn's sitting at 23 commitments. I should say the number 10 class in the country. Gus Malzahn has had a top 10 class every time he's here. People who say that Auburn isn't recruiting at a high level should talk to people who have been longtime fans who tell me on the other side of that is you should have been here from 2000 to 2010 when the recruiting wasn't so hot, wasn't highly regarded. So another top 10 class is possible. I think Auburn's going to have to pick up a commitment or two tomorrow, add 1 or 2 guys to the class to stay in the top 10. So let's get to your questions right now. A lot of them about Matthew Hill. Matthew Hill's outstanding 4-star receiver who committed to Auburn last August. He's from Brookwood High School just outside of Atlanta. Is he sticking with Auburn? He does appear to be sticking with Auburn. He had informed Clemson a couple weeks ago that that was his plan. Auburn, again, will have 4 receivers in the class. If they don't land anybody more on Wednesday, Matthew Hill, one of the best an Under Armour All-American who played outstanding football in the Under Armour All-America game, and a big play guy, top-end speed. If it doesn't work out at receiver or Auburn has another need somewhere else, for instance, safety down the road, he could play there. Extremely versatile athlete. I expect him also to contribute in the kicking game because of his combination of speed and elusiveness. We think Matthew Hill, we project he will stick with the Auburn Tigers. Any surprises or flips, Jake wants to know. Well, again, if it's a surprise, it's very hard to predict. But the guys to really keep an eye on would be a Richard Garage or a Jamar Chase, maybe a Malik Langham. I mean, they're still working on all these guys. Look, up until the last minute, the guys in the football office will be making phone calls, turning over every rock, making sure absolutely that they've got kids or they don't have kids. If they've got kids, then they're going to keep working on them and make sure they stick. If they don't have a kid, they're going to keep working on them to try to convince that young man to make a last-minute decision to sign with Auburn. So it doesn't really end. The phone calls continue to be made. But potential flips, I think Quay Walker's going to flip the 4-star linebacker, but I don't think he's going to flip from Alabama to Auburn. I think he's likely to flip to either Georgia, my first choice, or Tennessee. Richard Garage would be the other one, a longtime Florida commit, but there is a growing sense of confidence out of Gainesville that the Gators will hold on to the 4-star offensive tackle. Again, Auburn's still fighting, still hoping for the best. Look, if Auburn doesn't sign Richard Garage, then everything has to go into this weekend's official visit with Rice grad transfer Calvin Anderson. Right now, we think Texas is the team to beat with Michigan second and then Auburn, but he has not visited Auburn. So there will be more news this weekend. He will arrive at Auburn, I believe, on Friday, stay through Sunday, probably have a decision not too long after he officials to Auburn. He's a guy that could come in right away. Now, Richard Garage out of high school, the 4-star tackle from Tampa, he's going to need a couple years to develop. Calvin Anderson gives Auburn an option as a potential starter in year one, and year one really is would be his last year at Auburn. So that's where things stand with him. So a lot to still be determined, even after National Signing Day. Cole says, who's the surprise I said Auburn thinks they might get? Once again, I don't know. People clam up at the end. You have to understand that. What these schools don't want is they don't want other schools to know what they're thinking, who they're going to get or who they're not going to get. They want those schools to be working as hard as they can. But people love misdirection too. This is the time of year when false rumors spread. This is the time of year when people clam up and don't really want to give you too much insight. So I don't know. If I had to guess, I'd say it was either Jamar Chase, the 4-star receiver from Louisiana, or maybe Richard Garage. But again, that's what they think. That's not what I think. I'm a little bit more negative right now. But again, having hung out at the Auburn Athletic Complex today, there is an air of a feeling that, hey, look, maybe Auburn will have a surprise up its sleeve. We'll see. That's not me saying that to get extra page views. That's me repeating what I'm being told. Do I believe it? Do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I think maybe less than 50-50. But again, Auburn's history is of one of strong closing and surprises on National Signing Day. So it's tough to say. Cole says, do I feel strong about Jamar Chase? Well, Jamar Chase, the 4-star receiver from Louisiana, I believe is probably headed to LSU. In fact, I believe his father wants him at LSU. We've always gotten the feeling that Jamar would rather maybe be somewhere else. But at this point in time, I know that the level of confidence is very high at LSU. But, Auburn, and I should point out he just officially visited Auburn this past weekend. Auburn feels like it put up a good fight. It has pointed out, made a strong case for Jamar, why he should be at Auburn. He's an elite player, and you don't really need to add an extra receiver. But if you can get an extra receiver, Jamar Chase or Justin Ross, you take them. Those are high-level elite guys. Those are guys that you think have legitimate NFL talent and can help you right away and then obviously down the road. Next up, Corey says, so it's going to be a snoozer tomorrow. Well, Corey, I would only say that that's what people thought last year, too. And Auburn landed Marcavius Big Cat Bryant. Auburn landed Jartavius Whitlow. Auburn landed Tyrone Truesdell at the last minute. So, who, by the way, they think is going to be an outstanding player on the defensive line. So you just never really know. I'm kind of with you. I think that it could be a slow day tomorrow. But history says that Auburn generally pulls a surprise out at the last minute. We'll see. Anthony says, what about the offensive tackle from Rice? We talked about him a little bit. That's Calvin Anderson again. We think Texas. He's from Austin. Auburn's big pitch to him when he visits this coming weekend. And again, he's 6'5", 301 pounds, could start at left tackle or right tackle next year for Auburn. And what that does is that gives you a lot of flexibility with Calvin Ashley, with Prince Tega Wanago, Mike Horton, Markel Harrell, Nick Brahms, Caleb Kim. A lot of guys, gives you a lot of flexibility on that offensive line to really put 5 solid guys out there. But the question is, what kind of chance does Auburn have with Calvin Anderson? And I think they have an okay chance. He's going to come to town with his parents. His dad's a military grad, West Point grad, is a doctor. His mom's a big shot attorney in Austin. Closeness to home and the fact that he grew up wanting to play for Texas are the things working against Auburn. What's helping Auburn is J.B. Grimes' record of getting guys to the league. His work with Greg Robinson, who was the number 2 overall pick back in 2014. Auburn is going to pitch the idea to Calvin, hey, come to Auburn. It's just 6 or 7 months. You'll be out of here. You'll be in the NFL, but let's get you as prepared as possible for the NFL. And J.B. Grimes is going to try to make the case that he's the guy that's going to do it. He's the guy that's going to make Calvin Anderson the most prepared for the NFL. And obviously, he's recruiting against former Auburn offensive line coach Herb Hand, who now is with the Texas Longhorns. Justin says, any major junior college guys Auburn's looking at? Justin, doesn't appear to be. Here's why. The early signing period was always the case with the junior colleges, but and now with the high schools, but most of the top junior college guys traditionally sign in December because the 4-year schools want them there in January. You don't want to sign a guy at a junior college who has a limited amount of time to come in the summer and already having lost that first spring. Then they're already behind the 8 ball which then hurts their ability to play in year one unless there's some special talent. But most junior college guys sign in December, arrive in January. A perfect example of that is Daquan Newkirk, Auburn's defensive tackle signee, who already has impressed Auburn, the staff in off-season training and conditioning. Now, Jarvis says, what about Justin Ross? That's the #1 recruit in the state of Alabama, 4-star receiver from Phoenix City Central. Excellent player, high upside, tall, 6'3", 6'4", around 190 pounds, super athletic. There's a great video of him out there dunking a basketball, starting at the foul line, just inside the foul line. Phenomenal athlete. Most people think Alabama. Some people think Clemson. It's kind of gone back and forth. And, Auburn's fighting. Auburn's fighting. He just had his official visit to Auburn a couple of weeks ago. I think Auburn feels like it's in it more than people think. But at the end of the day, the confidence level, based on our sources and sources of our sister site, is that the confidence level is very high out of Tuscaloosa. Now, we'll see. Clemson also has put a good foot forward here. And in fact, for a long time, I thought maybe Clemson would get him. It's obviously hard to go into Alabama and pull a guy away from Auburn and Alabama. But we'll see. My pick right now would be Alabama. But again, some people think it's a little closer than we have maybe suggested. Richard wants to know, is Anthony Schwartz still committed? He absolutely is. He's the fastest recruit in the country. That's the 4-star receiver from American Heritage High School down in the greater Fort Lauderdale area of Florida. He has a recorded 100 meters time of 10.15 seconds. Absolutely rock solid to the Tigers. He just officially visited recently, and he's excited about being an Auburn Tiger. And in fact, he's also going to run track for the Tigers, who you may not even know finished 5th in the country last year. Florida was the national champion, and Florida is getting a lot of buzz. But Auburn sprinters had more success at NCAAs than Florida's did. So the sprint team is going to add Anthony Schwartz, an elite guy who probably can get you points at the NCAA meet next year, and Sean Shivers, the talented all-purpose back who's in the football 2018 recruiting class from down at Chaminade Madonna in Hollywood, Florida. He's a 200-meter specialist, one of the elite 200-meter guys in the country. Next question, why did Auburn stop recruiting Caleb Tanner? That's the 4-star defensive end from Atlanta. We touched on this earlier. He had basically told 3 schools, Auburn, Florida, Nebraska, hey, I'm coming. I think Auburn started thinking that, look, you already have somebody in the class, Richard Gibonor, who's a similar type player. Do you really need another guy like that? Do you want to wait? Is he playing games? Is this just another headache? And Auburn, quite frankly, just decided to pull out of that race. I think he could end up at Nebraska. A lot of people think Florida. We'll see. But Auburn just decided at the end of the day, let's use that spot somewhere else. SFC Arrington says, any more defensive back targets? It appears the big one remaining is Cam Taylor out of Park Crossing High School in Montgomery. Right now, we project him to Nebraska. The question is, will Auburn offer? If Auburn offers tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, I do suspect he will end up in the class at Auburn. So we'll see. But they got to offer first, because right now he's a strong Nebraska lean. Parker says, how big of a project is Joey Gatewood at quarterback? He's a big project, but he's a good project. And quite frankly, most high school quarterbacks are projects. The guys that we think are polished in high school aren't always polished when they get to college. 6'4", 235, 240 pounds. Had one person describe his strength to me just a couple of days ago at like this. He said Joey Gatewood is a bear. He's as strong as a bear. He's got a strong arm. He obviously can run. He's fast. He's quick. He's shifty. He's very hard to tackle. Had another person tell me if he was a tight end in this class, the 2018 class, he would far and away be the #1 ranked tight end in the country. But Joey's going to get a fair shot at quarterback. That's what he wants to play. That's what he believes he is. And again, he does have a strong arm. He's what you call a one-read quarterback right now, though, which means wherever that guy is, that first read, that's where the ball is going, or he's taking off. He'll have to develop a little bit more between the ears, and he's certainly capable of doing that. John says, War Eagle. We get a lot of those. Scott says, what are the JUCO possibilities? There really aren't any at this point. Again, most of the good JUCOs are already kind of snatched up. It'd be a surprise. Tony says, is Auburn recruiting anyone from the Pensacola, Florida area? Not in this cycle. Let's see here. A few more questions. Gregory says, any possible last-minute run at Tank Jenkins? That's the outstanding offensive lineman out of Montgomery. I don't think so, mainly because he's 6'1.5", 6'2". He'd be a guard. You know, Auburn already has 2 interior offensive linemen in this class. Would you want to take another one when really your need is at tackle at this point? So I think what Auburn's going to do is make a run at Richard Garage, obviously, between today and tomorrow. 4-star from Tampa. tackle, and then Calvin Anderson this weekend, the Rice grad transfer, who was a 2-time honorable mention All-Conference USA pick, but allowed among the fewest sacks in the country for a left tackle during the 2017 season, playing really on a miserable team the last 2 years. So he was kind of the one shining star at Rice on the offensive line. I think that's where the emphasis is going to be. You could see a tank at either Texas A&M or Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma feels fairly confident, but with Auburn not recruiting him ultra hard of late, I haven't paid as close attention as I usually would. It's always possible. They could have a meeting tonight and Auburn could say, you know what, let's just go get this guy. Enough is enough. But last check, it was really more of a need at tackle. And also there were some here who didn't quite think he was a great personality fit with the program. Devontae says, can Auburn get knocked out of the top 10? Yeah, they could. There's no doubt. I mean, they're number 10 right now, so it's always close. I think with 1 or 2 commitments, though, there's a very good chance, probably 70% or better, that Auburn will stay. 1 or 2 more commitments, pardon me. Auburn will stay in the top 10. David says, who's the hot name for 2019? Man, David, I can't even get through 2018. But guy who was just here over the weekend, 5-star running back Noah Cain out of Bradenton, Florida's IMG Academy, had a great visit. Originally from Louisiana, though, so watch LSU. Also watch Ohio State. But he has formed a bond. He's formed a bond from a camp, a big camp, an Under Armour camp in Orlando with Bo Nix, Auburn's 2019 quarterback commit. Could that pay off down the road? Possibly. He had an outstanding visit this past weekend, stayed 3 days in Auburn, and he'll be back. So let's see what happens. All right, a couple more questions, and I got to get back to work. Most recruiting analysts thought Quay Walker was only flipping to Auburn. I don't know anybody that thought that was the only school. It was always going to be other schools involved as well. Obviously, Georgia was always going to be someone in it. Now they've made a big push, no doubt about it. They could absolutely land him tomorrow. Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt leaving Alabama. That, again, he's been committed to Alabama. Now Jeremy's the head coach at Tennessee. Well, who's his defensive coordinator at Tennessee? Kevin Sher, the former linebackers coach at Georgia. So he had a relationship with Quay. So that put Tennessee in the picture. Georgia already in the picture. Then Auburn. So really it's been those 3 pushing Alabama. Of late, though, there's been mostly chatter about Tennessee. And then just in the last 24 hours to 48 hours, a lot of chatter about Georgia. I think it's going to be one of those 2, Tennessee or Georgia. Todd says Justin Ross is the most probable surprise. Todd, that certainly would be a surprise. That would fit in that category. But, there's been a lot of chatter. We know his grandmother wants him at Alabama. We know his mom, I'm not saying favors Clemson, but likes Clemson a lot. Could this be one of those interesting, unique situations where a compromise is made? It has happened. One person wants him here, one person wants him there. Let's meet in the middle. Justin certainly is comfortable with Auburn, and we'll see. Trey wants to know, what's my one bold pick for tomorrow? Trey, I don't know. This has been one of the more confounding recruiting classes to ever cover. In fact, Alabama lately has gotten its pick of the litter. But even the people that cover that program are scratching their heads right now with the chatter that Malik Langham could end up at Florida. So it's been a very hard class these last few weeks to predict out. And even the programs that normally are used to getting almost whoever they want, those tea leaves haven't necessarily bared the fruit. Am I mixing metaphors and all cliches and all that? I think I am, but it's been very difficult, and I'm not the only one struggling right now, thank goodness. But it is difficult because in my position, you want to give the readers as much information as possible. And we're going to give you a little bit of new information right now, and that's on safety commit Kobe Fuqua. Now, back in December, it looked like he was going to sign with the Tigers on December 20th. We broke the story leading up to signing day that Auburn had asked him to hold off, and he potentially could ask him to take a gray shirt. At this time, right now, Tuesday afternoon, late afternoon in Auburn, Alabama, it has not yet been determined whether Auburn will ask him to take a gray shirt or not. Now, what does that tell me? That tells me that Auburn is holding out hope that it could land one of these big fish down the stretch. Doesn't mean they're going to, but they're certainly waiting to see what happens with these guys, and then a determination will be made tomorrow what to do with Kobe Fuqua. Now, if it turns out that they offer him a gray shirt, he very well could end up at another school. He would rather not do that. He was coming off a torn labrum and labrum surgery. Keep an eye on Troy if that happens. We understand Troy does like him a lot, and that would certainly be a big pickup for them. So we'll have to see. But right now, no decision made yet on Kobe Fuqua. So does Auburn think it can get one of these guys? Again, a lot of people in this building are keeping quiet right now. This is the time where everybody clams up. Nobody really wants to talk. They don't want that information getting out there. Again, my gut says the 2 to really watch are Cam Taylor, the defensive back out of Montgomery, and Caleb Johnson, the defensive lineman out of Columbus. But I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. Those kids aren't saying much. We do know that Auburn has had communications as recently as 2 nights ago with Cam Taylor. Okay, so if Auburn offers, we think Nebraska chances of landing him, which look really good right now, wouldn't be so good. All right, Corey says, if J.B. Grimes is so good, why did Auburn run him off in the first place? Let's just talk recruiting, Corey. Sometimes there's personality conflicts on the staff. Sometimes a guy wants a change of pace. I know people that are happy in jobs they have and wake up one morning and want a new job. So who knows? Who knows? Chris says, is Cam Taylor recruited as a safety? I think, Chris, he'd be a nickel corner type. Auburn already has 2 really good safeties in this class. He could. Again, if Auburn ends up gray-shirting Colby Fuqua or he ends up somewhere else, you could see Cam as a safety nickel. Right now, I think it's corner nickel, but that's probably to be determined. We don't know. A lot of it may depend on Colby Fuqua and also need of the team. I mean, if a safety gets hurt, you may need a guy to play back some. So, that's kind of the way it goes sometimes. All right. John wants to know, where do I rank Auburn's linebackers class? I think it's a very good class. I think Michael Harris is one of the more undervalued players in the country. 6'2.5", 215, 220 pounds. He's an absolute beast, one of the more physical players in the entire country. Nobody tackles harder than this guy that I saw all season in, covering games in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Love him. Zacoby McClain out of Valdosta. Now, he's not a big guy, 5'11", 6 foot, 210 pounds, but extremely quick. He's the kind of guy that can play the star position. He can be a hybrid safety linebacker type. Then you have Josh Marsh. I think the guy's led the state in tackles the last couple of years in the state of Alabama. A tackling machine with great top-end speed. Covers a lot of ground. I think he needs to get better shedding blocks, but he's got a lot of ability, and they think he can contribute even in year 1 on special teams. And then finally, Richard Jubinor, Nigeria native, is a buck linebacker. I mean, technically he's a linebacker, but he'll be at the line of scrimmage a lot, hand in the dirt sometimes. The Carl Lawson, Jeff Holland position, technically listed at linebacker. Outstanding prospect, but a little bit of a project. He's a freaky athlete, but again, he has only played American football a few years. He's a native of Nigeria, so it's kind of one of those situations where he's just got to learn more and more about the game. But the high-end stuff, he's got it. And look, Auburn's got so many guys back on the defensive line next year that he might not necessarily need to play that much. So we'll see. All right, one more question, then we're going to get rolling here. Brandon says, how impactful is Auburn's D-line this year? Why aren't big-name recruits giving Auburn a good look? Brandon, I got to tell you, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think, one, it's a down defensive line year. There's no question about that. Nationally, down defensive line, the class of 2018. But when you look at what Auburn's bringing in, it's really hard to complain, okay? You've got defensive tackle Daquan Newkirk, who's already here from junior college, who Auburn believes is a freak and can contribute in year 1. You have Connis Miller, the number 1 defensive lineman in the state of Alabama. Okay, that's 2 pretty good guys. You have Coyote Oladell, 6'4", 245 pounds, out of Miami by way of Nigeria. A little bit of a project. Probably a guy by year 2 is playing a lot. There's nobody in the country that looks better physically than this guy, okay? And then you have Richard Jibinor, 4-star buck, who's going to be that pass rusher you need down the road. So when you look at those 4 guys, I don't know how you could complain at all. Okay, those were top of the board type guys for Auburn. Guys that Auburn identified early in the process, particularly Connis Miller and Richard Jibinor. Coyote really entered the picture over the summer, but Auburn loves his upside. Anyway, that will do it. This is Keith Niebuhr with 24/7 Sports on Auburn Undercover. Again, Auburn with 23 commitments. 15 are already signed. 8 guys saying they're coming. That's 23 total. Could add 2 or 3 tomorrow. Potentially, there could be a guy Colby Fuqua, who's asked to gray shirt. If that happens, that would give you flexibility to take one more guy. We think Auburn is going to hold a spot, regardless of what happens, for Calvin Anderson, the Rice grad transfer, who visits this coming weekend on an official down to Auburn, Texas, Michigan. Auburn sitting in 3rd right now. But again, 23 on board right now, 23 committed, the number 10 recruiting class in the country. I will be at Auburn bright and early tomorrow around 5:36 a.m. We will have all day coverage from Auburn. We hope everybody has a great National Signing Day. You never know. Again, last year at this time, I was thinking it was going to be a boring National Signing Day, and a lot of us remember what happened. The shock of the Big Cat Bryant commitment, the shock of Auburn offering Jartavis Whitlow really seemingly out of the blue late. So there's always surprises on National Signing Day. Regardless of how Auburn finishes tomorrow, I think it's been a very good class. I would have liked to seen a little bit more on the offensive line, like a lot of you, and maybe a little bit more at cornerback. But all in all, a solid class with more than a dozen 4 stars. And again, when you're in the top 10, it's very hard to complain. And if you have difference makers, that then becomes the key. Does Auburn have any potential difference makers in this class? That remains to be seen. We'll know in a few years. But it's a good, solid class. Again, everybody, thank you for stopping by. Check out auburnundercover.com tomorrow. Take care.